Alright, so let's go ahead and discuss the Properties panel. The first thing I'm going to show you is the Properties panel when you don't have anything selected, whether it be an SVG file or some text. Okay, so just to show you, I'm going to put a heart on the mat. As you can see here, when we have this heart selected, we have some additional options here. Now notice when I take and I deselect it by clicking anywhere on the mat, we've got some basic options here in this Properties panel. The first one being your mat size. You can select 6x12, 12x12, or 24x12. And then you've got your orientation. So depending on how your cutting machine is set up on your desk, you may want to change the orientation to match that. So let's take a look here. You've got vertical and you've got horizontal. Now let me zoom out for just a second here so you can see this. If I do a 6x12, okay, and if I change it from horizontal to vertical, and that just kind of gives you a better idea of where your element is, and, depending on how you're going to be feeding it into your machine. So it's not a big deal. You can do it either way. There's no wrong or right way. Okay, and you also have the units option here. You can change it from inches to centimeters if you use the metric system. And then you can zoom in or zoom out using this zoom feature here. Okay, and you can also zoom in or zoom out using the zoom in tool here. Okay, and you can actually zoom in further or zoom out further using these tools here than these values here. These are just some predefined values, and these will actually allow you to zoom in a lot closer or a lot further out. As you can see here, this is zoomed at 50%, but I can actually zoom out further by grabbing this magnifying glass with a minus sign and just clicking on my mat, and that's going to zoom me out. Okay, in addition to that, you also have the option to name the current page. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a later video, but we can name this heart, and you'll see here that when we hit enter, this little tab right here changes to what we typed in here, and we can change the color here as well. And this is just used to color coordinate certain elements or just to help you identify the different pages or tabs. And we'll discuss that in more detail in a more advanced video. Okay, now while we're looking at these options, I just want to show you that it's also possible to change your mat size under the cutter option here, and you can select your mat size here, okay? And you can also click on view to zoom in or zoom out, okay? So you've got different options or different ways of doing certain things. Okay, now let me show you what the properties panel looks like when you have an element selected. Okay, so I'm going to take a star, I'm going to put it on my mat, and you'll notice now that I've got this element highlighted, there are a lot more options here. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is the X and Y coordinate. And the X and Y coordinates help you accurately place your objects in a specific place on your mat. So let's say, for example, that I want to make sure that this star starts to cut on the 2-inch mark. Okay, so I can just go here and type in 2 and hit enter on my keyboard. And now you'll notice that the leftmost part of this star lines up with the 2 right here. Okay, I've actually found the X and Y coordinate option very useful when you find an SVG file, and when you import it, it's actually so large that you can't even find this handle here. And I'm going to try to illustrate that for you. Okay, now you see that? I can't grab it anymore. Okay, so if you happen to accidentally move it off the mat, take a look at your X and Y coordinates here. They're in the negatives now. If I take and change the X and Y coordinates to 0, 0, it'll place the star back on the mat where I can actually click on it and drag it and move it around. So basically, the X and Y coordinates are going to help you be more precise with where you place your objects. Okay, and just below the X and Y coordinate options here, you'll see these nudge arrows. Okay, and these nudge arrows, with your element selected, when you click on them, it'll actually move your element 1/100th of an inch, okay, for each time that you click on these. So this is just for a very precise movement. Because if you take and try to move it yourself, okay, it looks like I'm moving it about 2/100ths of an inch. Okay, so this is a little bit more precise. And below that, you've got your horizontal align. Okay, this is going to horizontally align it to the left, to the center, and to the right. Here's your vertical align. We'll align it vertically at the top, middle, and the bottom. All right, so below the horizontal and vertical align buttons, you'll see the width and the height section here. And this is basically telling us the actual width and height for the element that we have selected. Okay, so what we can do is we can go in and manually alter these settings by clicking here. Okay, or we can type in the values that we want. And now, more importantly, this little button here, this Keep Proportions button, when we have this checked, we can utilize it in two different ways. One is if we actually resize it using this handle, it will make sure that it stays in proportion. Okay, so when we drag it, it will equally increase the width and the height. Now watch what happens when I uncheck this. When I uncheck it, it's no longer locked in proportion, so I can take it and I can skew it. I can make it taller and skinnier, I can make it fatter and wider. But with Keep Proportions checked, it will keep it in proportion. No matter what I try to do, it will increase and decrease the width and the height together. Okay, now you can use this another way too. With Keep Proportions checked here, you can actually type in a value like 4, and when I hit enter, it not only changes the width to 4, but it changes the height to be proportionate with that 4. Okay, so watch again here. If I type in 6, watch the height. As soon as I hit enter, the height changes to 5.29. So the Keep Proportions option is basically going to make sure that the element, when you import it, stays at that same proportion. Okay, and it's up to you on how you want to use it. You can uncheck it if you want to alter your element, or keep it checked to make sure that it stays in the way that it was originally designed. Okay, so I'm going to grab my type tool now, and I'm going to click on the mat, and I'm just going to type crafty. I'm going to click my selection tool, and I'm going to take and make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to take and convert crafty to outlines. Okay, so I've got my word on my mat, and we're going to discuss this next section here under Appearance. And you'll notice that when we click on the drop down next to Style, there's an option to create a shadow. Okay, and what the shadow does is it basically creates the same element, except it makes it a little bit wider. So for example, let's say you're working on a card or a scrapbook layout, and you've got the word crafty, but you want to put it on top of itself to create like a shadow effect. Okay, well, you can do that by clicking on this drop down and clicking shadow, and then you can increase or decrease this value to increase or decrease the intensity of that shadow. Okay, the next option in this drop down is Blackout. Okay, and what Blackout does, and before I do this, I just want to show you, I'm going to click on this preview button. Okay, and when I do that, you can see exactly what's going to be cut. Now you'll notice the letter R and the letter A, they have an outer cut, and they also have an inner cut. Okay, same with the A. Now, what the Blackout option does is it takes those inner cuts and it removes them. So watch, I'll click. Okay, and now the inner cut is gone. It only keeps the outer cut. Okay, so that's what the Blackout feature does. And I'll show you again here with something else like this ampersand. Okay, I'm going to bring that here and make it bigger just to show you. And now you see that when we hit the preview button, you've got this outer cut, and you also have two inner cuts. Okay, if you want to get rid of that, you just highlight your object, you go to Style, and you click Blackout, and it removes those inner cuts. Now this will work on any element that has an outer cut as well as inner cuts, and it doesn't matter how many inner cuts there are, it will black those out. Okay, so that's that option. And then you also have, let me get rid of this, and you also have the shadow blackout option, which does a combination of the two. It will create a shadow and a blackout. So I've got that selected. I'm going to increase it, and there it is. It's creating the shadow, and it blacked out the letters R and A. Okay. Okay, next let's take a look at this option here. And this is just a flip. It'll literally flip it horizontally or vertically, depending on which button you want to hit. Okay, now the flip option probably makes more sense with some elements. Just to show you here, you can take this heart. Okay, and I'm just going to take another heart. Now I've got this heart here, and I can take it. Let's say that I want to put it on all four corners of a scrapbook page, and I want it to be, the same size, same proportion, same everything. Well, I can just flip it horizontally, and now I can put that in my upper right-hand corner. Okay, so that's what you use the flip for. And then finally, let's talk about the weld button here. Now what the weld button does is it allows you to take 2 or more elements on your mat, overlap them, and set them to cut as one piece. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate that here. I'm going to take this heart, I'm going to go to Edit and Copy. I'm going to go to Edit and Paste. Okay, now I'm going to take this one, I'm going to flip it back over, and I'm going to take these and lay them on top of each other. Okay, now you can see there's this darker red in here. That tells me that they're overlapping. Okay, now we can use the zoom in tool to zoom in a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on each heart one at a time, and I'm going to click Weld. Okay, now I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to click Weld. Now when you want to weld something, you have to make sure that the 2 elements, or however many elements you're trying to weld together, you have to make sure that you've selected the weld check mark for each element. Okay, so now watch. Let's make sure that it's going to cut properly. And we can do that by clicking on this preview button. And as you can see here, we've got one continuous line. These gray lines show you where the individual elements start and end, but the red line actually shows you what your cutting machine is going to cut. Okay, now let me show you here. If I just click on one of these and deselect the weld option, and then I go back up here and I click preview, you'll notice that they no longer cut as one piece. It's gonna make that cut right there, and you'll have 2 separate hearts with a piece in the middle. So let me show you again. If I click weld and go under here to preview the cut, you can see that it'll be one cut for you.